if you had been charged with the most heinous of crimes, knowing that you were innocent? Because that's what's happened to one prominent Nottinghamshire councillor who finally saw child sex offences against him dropped on Monday.
Now, Jason Zadrozny from Sutton in Ashfield has told BBC Radio Nottingham he believes he's been the victim of a smear campaign by political opponents. I've been to see him.
We're in the market square at the Sundial at Sutton in Ashfield.
It's usually busy, but it's not market day.
It's not market day, it's a bit cold, but it's still bustly. It's a good town centre, look.
What's it like to walk through your local town where you've grown up, where you've been a local councillor for many years, with this kind of serious allegation over your head?
It's been pretty horrific for a number of reasons. Obviously, you always get people looking at you a little bit strangely.
Do they?
Well, yeah, you get that when you've had such a horrific thing. It's the worst thing that you can be accused of, very publicly, front page of our local paper. It made all the national papers. This is my hometown, and people have been remarkably supportive. I think the worst thing that happened was just a few weeks after it, my father had a huge heart attack and died, so never got to see me clear my name. It's been a very public affair, really. It's not pleasant.
And how much do you think what happened to your dad was related to what was happening to you at the time?
I'm fairly convinced it didn't help his health. He was only 62 and he was very, very stressed about, very frightened for me. He had a huge heart attack, so I put a lot of that stress down to Case, obviously, but one of those things we'll never know.
And he didn't get to see you clear your name?
Part of me thinks he was there anyway, and he always believed in me, and he knew I was innocent, but of course that's one of the things I've got to live with, that no, he never got to see me clear my name.
We're going to sit down. Where shall we go?
Well, there's a coffee shop just in here.
Morning, kiddo.
Morning. How you doing?
Nice to see you.
Thank you, nice to see you as well.
There's a man with the cleaning cart at the Idlewild Shopping Centre.
Just before election, didn't he? Because we were a planned job.
40 days before the election, yeah. And as you saw on the news, it's dropped with nothing at all, so it stinks a bit.
Just well done, by the way.
Here's a couple who've just stopped Jason to talk to you about one of their local matters. So have you been following what's been going on?
Because we thought there was something fishy about it. Why did it come up just before election? But obviously it's been proved right, hasn't it?
Personally, I don't think that they should release the details until it's proved. You're all over the newspapers, and then sometimes people just remember that. They don't see the bit, the news yesterday where it was thrown out.
So sitting here in a coffee shop in the Idlewild Shopping Centre is not presumably what you'd have planned for this week?
Thought I was going to be in court for the full 2 weeks, so it's rather nice to be enjoying a cup of hot chocolate with you instead. Yeah, it's a bit of a shock to the system.
What was it like finding out that the whole thing had collapsed on the day that you turned up suited and booted in court?
I mean, obviously it was the best outcome. I was delighted that all the charges were dropped and they realised that they'd got no evidence, which we'd been saying all along. I do almost feel a bit robbed. For all this time I've wanted to have my day in court and say, not only was there no evidence, but to be found properly not guilty and stand up in the dock and say that. And I feel like that's been taken away. I have the comfort that the judge was very clear that there was no evidence and I wasn't guilty. It is a bit of a surreal situation this morning to wake up and feel like that. Yeah. The whole thing's been a colossal cock-up, actually, on behalf of the police. They arrested me 2.5 years ago. It took them a year and a half before they decided to charge me, and all on basically the word of somebody who made these allegations. There's never been any evidence presented.
What do you think's gone on?
Clearly somebody's either deliberately falsified the information or it's been a human error, but it would be a remarkable thing for somebody to accidentally doctor evidence in a very serious case. So I think somebody's had a vendetta or somebody's been told to do it, and clearly we intend to sue on that basis so that I can make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody else.
You were about to be the election candidate for the Liberal Democrats for this area just before the general election in 2015, and then just a few weeks before you were arrested for this. Is there something politically fishy going on here?
I've always thought that. It's no secret that the Labour Party thought that this was a tight seat and they were very, very frightened about us winning. I don't think it's ever helped that we have a politicised police force. We have a political police and crime commissioner now. I'm reasonably confident that he's had no direct involvement, but he certainly knew about my impending arrest. He was briefed on stuff. There's certainly something that stinks about the level of politics in how this case has been handled.
They wouldn't go to those lengths, though, would they? Politicians wouldn't go to the lengths of having somebody put in this situation for politics, would they?
Yes, they would. I mean, I never believed, and maybe naively, I never believed that local politics was this dirty. But yeah, it seems to me they have. There have been Labour Party members in Ashfield that have come to me. They were invited to stand for local election, and they said, no, we're not standing in those seats, we'll never win. And months before I was arrested, they were told, don't worry, we're having Jason sorted out, he won't be there at that time. So I think there's some really dirty tricks happened here, and we've not got to the bottom of where they've come from, but the Labour Party have certainly got a lot to answer for in this.
And yet, if an allegation is made of such a serious nature, the police have got to take it seriously and got to tackle this. So what else could they have done?
No, well, that's exactly right, but that's why the allegation was timed. That's why the police had to do what they had to do. The thing the police did do and made a mistake is, before they arrested me, they got the evidence from where I lived at the time, what cars I was driving at the time. They knew that I couldn't have possibly done this. They were still told to arrest me. It didn't matter then whether it was true or not. 40 days before a very crucial general election, that meant that reasonably I couldn't stand because, well, firstly, the bad press, but secondly, my head wasn't in the game. I needed to make sure that I cleared my name. So, of course, they nobbled the general election.
Jason Zadrozny speaking to Sarah about what's happened to him and what he's been through. Well, the BBC has put some of those allegations that he's made there to the Labour Party. The allegation that he'd been the victim of a Labour smear campaign, that Labour were behind the timing of his arrest in 2015, that Labour members intending to stand for local election in Ashfield were told not to worry about the Lib Dems because Jason Zadrozny would be sorted out, was the phrase that he used there, and that the Police and Crime Commissioner Paddy Tipping was aware of Jason Zadrozny's impending arrest. In response to that, Labour declined the chance to appear on this morning's programme and said it is an operational issue and therefore entirely a matter for the Chief Constable. And that's exactly what Paddy Tipping's office said too. Well, BBC Radio Nottingham contacted Nottinghamshire Police with these allegations. They declined to respond to any specific questions. There is a statement on their website which says, we have a duty to investigate all reports of sexual offences, no matter how long ago the offences occurred or who they are against. Victims should feel they will be believed by the police, who will then investigate thoroughly and impartially and follow where the evidence takes us. It is not the role of the police to decide on what should be prosecuted or to determine guilt or innocence, which is done by a jury. Obviously that role falls to the CPS, doesn't it? And there's a statement from them too. A statement from the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, says a file of evidence was referred to the CPS by Nottinghamshire Police in January 2016. It was decided that the case met the evidential and public interest tests set out in the Code for Crown Prosecutors and charges were authorised. This case, though, has been kept under continual review, and in light of new information provided to prosecutors, the evidential test is no longer met. This specifically relates to the age of the complainant at the time of the alleged offences. We have therefore stopped proceedings by offering no evidence.
You're listening to BBC Radio Nottingham, just gone 8:15 now.
Paul Bacon's been listening to this. He's a retired solicitor. He's worked on some of Nottinghamshire's most high-profile criminal cases. Morning, Paul.
Morning.
How unusual is it for a case to collapse right at the start of the trial, for no evidence effectively to be offered as everyone's standing in court?
Really odd, really strange. I mean, the position is that people are interviewed at the police station and can give their account, and then that's weighed in the balance, and the decision is made whether to charge somebody, and you've got to get to that level. Then after that, the Crown Prosecution Service weigh up the evidence and judge whether to carry on, and then the papers go to a barrister who will work with the Crown Prosecution to work out whether the case carries on, and, you know, to get to the court door, absolutely unbelievable. I mean, in my experience, I can't honestly think of a case, except in tragic circumstances where maybe the main prosecution witness has got a terminal illness or died, you know what I mean, that sort of thing. But for no apparent reason, there's no information available which says this case is being dropped because not, the witness is ill or whatever. So it's a really, really unusual circumstance.
And Jason Zadrozny very clearly saying there that there was no evidence. It basically was one person's word against another. So how unusual is that you have a court case based on one person's word against another? I imagine many of these sexual abuse case stories are a bit like that.
They are, but the Crown Prosecution Service have to weigh up whether they've got a reasonable prospect of success. And normally wouldn't just proceed on that. He would need some corroborative evidence to try and support the prosecution case. So it's odd. I mean, it really is all very peculiar. And I have to say I can understand his concern about the way the case has been dropped. They didn't give him the chance to explain himself in court, to hear the other party, the witness for the prosecution, saying what they had to say. It's left the whole thing with a very unsatisfactory conclusion. And I can fully understand him being concerned about doing something to try and resolve that issue.
So he's talking about suing the police, effectively. Again, that seems a fairly unusual move, or is that fairly common if people are clear?
Not common at all. Very difficult to pursue. Malicious prosecution, you have to show bad faith, you have to show that there really was no proper justification for making the arrest, pursuing the case, and so on and so forth. And not an easy task, but cases have been brought, and I suppose the other way, I don't know the detail of the case, nobody seems to know the detail of the case. The other way will be to sue for defamation, of course, because if someone is saying this happened, that would go in directly to the person making the allegation, but massively difficult, massively difficult. I think malicious prosecution is probably the only way forward. That would at least bring out into the open, or into him and his legal advisors, more information about what was going on in the background. The other side would have to make disclosure of their process of decision making, what they decided and when and how. I mean, the other major thing about this is the length of time is extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And of course, it's passed over yet another election for this chap. We have an election this year, so it's quite bizarre that the whole thing seems to overarch to the election process. I'm not saying there's any other information available which says it's politically motivated. I don't know. The fact of the matter is, for a case to take 3 years, based on what he said in that interview just now, was one person's allegation. I mean, how long does it take you to interview somebody, get a statement, try and corroborate it, do the bit of corroboration, put it up, ask the other side, ask the prosecutor to make a decision, and crack on?
What about the money here? Because he's substantially out of pocket, having had an allegation made against him, which it seems is not true. He's had to pay vast amounts in legal fees.
Yes.
What can he do about that?
Well, that would be part and parcel of his case. If he was able to mount a claim for malicious prosecution, it's a monetary compensation that he gets, and that would include loss of wages, loss of opportunity to earn, and so on and so forth. I mean, what he couldn't compensate would be the loss of an opportunity to become an MP, which it might have been the position had he this never started and he'd carried on in the way challenging Labour, which was what he was up to at the time that this all suddenly kicked off.
Okay.
But yes, compensation would be the way he would deal with that.